Din Djarin has a code. He follows the way. He brings in bounties alive when the puck says alive, and he even broke every rule in his guild to save a tiny green child. Now compare that to a real man from 1873 who delivered a wagon full of dead bodies to a federal court and said, quote, "They resisted arrest." The judge paid him anyway. No questions asked. We love to imagine bounty hunters as these ruthless space-age mercenaries flying between planets with blasters and Beskar armor. But the truth is, the actual bounty hunters of the American Wild West operated in ways that would make the entire Bounty Hunters Guild look like a Boy Scout troop. Today, we are putting the Mandalorian's galaxy of hunters up against the real frontier bounty hunters of the 1800s. And I promise you, one group was significantly worse. And it is not the one with jetpacks. Let's start with what we know from the Star Wars universe. In The Mandalorian, bounty hunting is essentially a regulated profession. There is a guild, there are tracking fobs, there are chain codes and bounty pucks that specify whether a target is wanted dead or alive. Grief Karga runs the operation like a jobs board, handing out assignments with at least some pretense of structure and accountability. Hunters take their commission, they do the work, and they come back for payment. There are even professional courtesies. Remember how upset everyone got when Din Djarin broke guild protocol by rescuing Grogu? There were actual consequences. The guild turned on him. He became a fugitive himself. That tells us something important. Even in this lawless corner of the galaxy, there are rules. There is a system. Sure, you have psychopaths like the other bounty hunters who showed up on Navarro. And yes, characters like Boba Fett and Cad Bane built their reputations on being cold and efficient. But even they operate within a framework. They take contracts, they have clients. They have a professional identity that they maintain. The Mandalorian Code goes even further with its emphasis on honor, loyalty, and protecting foundlings. Din Djarin is basically the most ethical mercenary in fiction. Now hold that thought, because we are about to meet his real-world counterparts, and the contrast is going to hit you like a mudhorn charge. The American frontier of the mid to late 1800s was, to put it politely, an absolute mess when it came to law enforcement. Vast territories had almost no official police presence. Towns might have a single sheriff responsible for hundreds or even thousands of square miles. Federal marshals were spread impossibly thin. So what did the government do? They outsourced violence. Bounty hunting in the Wild West was not a regulated profession. There was no guild, no tracking fobs, no chain codes. In many territories, literally anyone could decide to become a bounty hunter. You did not need a license. You did not need training. You barely needed a reason. If someone had a warrant out for their arrest, or even if a private citizen posted a reward, any person with a horse and a gun could ride out, capture or kill that individual, and collect payment. And here is where it gets really dark. The system attracted exactly the kind of people you would expect. Many bounty hunters were themselves former criminals, outlaws who realized it was more profitable to hunt men than to rob stagecoaches. Some were violent drifters looking for a legal excuse to do what they were already doing. Others were lawmen who realized the bounty system paid better than their official salary and started blurring the line between justice and murder for profit. Take Bass Reeves, one of the most famous deputy marshals in history. He was genuinely heroic by most accounts, a formerly enslaved man who became one of the greatest lawmen of his era. But even Reeves operated in a system where he was paid per arrest and per warrant served, which created an obvious financial incentive to bring in as many bodies as possible. And Reeves was one of the good ones. The bad ones were nightmarish. Let's talk about how these real bounty hunters actually operated, because this is where the comparison to The Mandalorian gets almost laughable. In the Star Wars universe, hunters use sophisticated tracking technology. They have scanning equipment, informant networks, and those handy little fobs that beep faster as you get closer to your target. It is almost surgical. Real frontier bounty hunters used gossip, intimidation, and terror. A common tactic was to ride into a town, find someone who knew the target, and threaten them until they talked. Sometimes they would hold family members at gunpoint. Sometimes they would burn property. There was effectively no oversight. No one was checking their methods. If a bounty hunter dragged a man back to town and said he was the wanted fugitive, the local authorities often took his word for it. Misidentification happened constantly. Innocent people were captured, beaten, and sometimes killed because a bounty hunter thought they looked like the person on a wanted poster. And about those wanted posters, we have all seen the iconic dead or alive image in westerns. That was real, and it was essentially a license to kill. When a poster said dead or alive, many hunters interpreted that as permission to shoot first and never bother asking questions. Why would you risk your life trying to capture a dangerous outlaw alive when you could shoot him from a distance, throw the body over a horse, and still collect the full reward? Some hunters became infamous for never bringing anyone back alive. It was simply easier and safer to kill. Tom Smith, not the famous marshal but a lesser-known bounty man operating in the Indian Territory, reportedly killed over a dozen men he claimed were fugitives. At least 3 of them turned out to be the wrong person entirely. He faced no criminal charges. Now imagine Din Djarin accidentally disintegrating 3 innocent people. The fan base would riot. The New Republic would intervene. But in the real Wild West, it was just Tuesday. Here is something that really puts this into perspective. In the entire run of The Mandalorian through 3 seasons, Din Djarin's on-screen body count, while impressive, is almost entirely composed of people who were actively trying to kill him. Stormtroopers, pirates, rival hunters, Imperial remnants. He is not riding into towns and gunning down civilians. He goes out of his way to protect the innocent. He literally adopted a child mid-mission because his conscience would not let him hand Grogu over to a client he did not trust. The real Wild West bounty hunters had no such scruples. The most infamous example might be the case of Judge Isaac Parker's court in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Parker was known as the hanging judge, and he employed over 200 deputy marshals who also functioned as bounty hunters throughout Indian Territory. Between 1875 and 1896, his jurisdiction saw an almost incomprehensible amount of violence. Deputies brought in thousands of prisoners and hundreds of bodies. The line between lawful arrest and extrajudicial killing was so blurry it was essentially non-existent. Some deputies were later found to have fabricated warrants to justify killing people they had personal grudges against. Others collected bounties on men who were never actually wanted for any crime. And then there were the private bounty hunters who operated completely outside even this loose framework. During range wars and land disputes, wealthy ranchers would hire bounty hunters to eliminate rivals, squatters, or anyone else they considered a problem. These hunters were essentially assassins with a thin legal veneer. The Lincoln County War in New Mexico, the Johnson County War in Wyoming, these conflicts featured hired guns who were bounty hunters in name and murderers in practice. So let us bring this full circle. On one side, we have the bounty hunters of the Star Wars galaxy. Regulated by a guild, guided by tracking technology, operating under at least some professional code. Led, in the case of our protagonist, by a deeply personal sense of honor and morality. On the other side, we have the real bounty hunters of the American frontier. Unregulated, unsupervised, frequently criminal themselves. Operating in a system that financially rewarded violence and asked almost no questions about how results were achieved. A system where innocent people died regularly, where the hunters were sometimes worse than the hunted, and where the concept of justice was whatever the man with the fastest gun said it was. The Mandalorian makes bounty hunting look cool and dangerous, but ultimately honorable. The real history is just dangerous. There was very little honor to be found. Din Djarin would have been appalled. Honestly, even Boba Fett would have raised an eyebrow. The Wild West did not need Beskar armor or darksabers to be brutal. It just needed a wanted poster, a revolver, and a system that looked the other way. This is the way? No. This was the way, and it was so much worse. If this video made you see bounty hunters in a whole new light, smash that like button so hard it echoes across the outer rim. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already, because we do deep dives like this every single week, pulling back the curtain on the real history behind your favorite fictional worlds. And drop a comment below telling me which real Wild West figure you think would survive the longest in the Star Wars Bounty Hunting Guild. I genuinely want to know your picks. Bass Reeves in Beskar armor. Tell me that would not be the greatest show ever made. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.